11 millennia ago, a nameless artist descended into a pitch-black subterranean chamber to carve a terrifying testament to human psychology. Surrounded by stone leopards with bared teeth, a solitary figure grips his own anatomy in a desperate, frozen display of vulnerability and dominance. This single, silent tableau proves our ancestors were telling complex mythological stories long before they learned to farm. The findings at the Sayburç site were only published in 2022 by archaeologist Aliam Özdoğan in Antiquity. For decades, this reality sat quietly beneath the foundations of modern stone houses in Turkey's Şanlıurfa region. Human beings were merely soft, exposed targets in a dangerous ecosystem. We often assume these early bands were wholly consumed by the logistics of finding food, devoid of the luxury of abstract thought or existential dread. As excavators cleared the final layer of soil, the archival record shifted permanently. The central figure in this terrifying scene wasn't holding a weapon to defend himself, but stood entirely and inexplicably defenseless. The descent into the Sayburç gallery marks the sudden, terrifying end of their fragile surface-level existence. When these ancient people chose to carve directly into the bedrock, they deliberately turned their backs on the safety of the open sky. They moved into an absolute, claustrophobic darkness, where the physical rules of the wild no longer applied, but the psychological terror of it was magnified tenfold. To create this relief required them to huddle in a lightless, oxygen-deprived hollow for weeks or months, breathing in choking limestone dust as they systematically chipped away the earth. Gripping crude flint chisels, they dragged stone against stone to scar a nightmare into the bedrock. The labor was intensely physical, echoing deafeningly through the cavernous space, a desperate necessity that completely defies modern comprehension. They were not constructing a shelter to escape the harsh elements, nor a storehouse for foraged grain. They were building a permanent, immovable monument to their own ultimate vulnerability. Every strike of the chisel was a confrontation with the very monsters that hunted them in the grass above. The deeper they carved into the limestone, the more the narrative of a simple, primitive mind began to fracture. Radiocarbon analysis of the surrounding sediment instantly shattered the established timeline of human consciousness, proving this psychological masterpiece was carved millennia before mankind learned to plant a single seed. The sheer monumental effort required to carve such intricate high-relief figures into the bedrock implies a society mobilizing not for practical survival utility, but for an intense, overwhelming ideological urgency. They poured their collective energy into the dark, immortalizing a moment of paralyzing terror in stone, locking their darkest anxieties in the deep earth. And then, abruptly and inexplicably, the archaeological record simply stops. The stone fangs remain perpetually bared in the dark, but the hands that carved them vanished seamlessly back into the prehistoric landscape. They completed their terrifying masterpiece and left only an impenetrable, unbroken silence behind. We spent 11 millennia building walls and cities to forget the dark, only to dig under a modern living room and find our exact same night terrors staring back at us from the bedrock. Yet the microscopic analysis of the surrounding communal building revealed a chilling truth. There were no domestic hearths or signs of daily life, meaning they did not live in this sanctuary, but only descended into the dark to leave their terror in the stone before vanishing. The physical evidence left in the Sayburç bedrock is unyielding. Aliam Özdoğan's 2000-2002 report laid bare the undeniable facts of the site. The anchor of this mystery is the central human figure itself. Despite being flanked on both sides by massive, menacing leopards with deeply carved bared teeth, the human is entirely defenseless. This physical reality fundamentally breaks established anthropological models. For nearly a century, V. Gordon Childs' foundational 1936 Neolithic Revolution framework insisted that complex narrative mythological storytelling and monumental art were exclusively the products of settled agricultural societies. Yet, the radiocarbon dating places this complex ideological art thousands of years earlier. Two documented pillars of archaeology are left in complete contradiction. Tens of thousands of years earlier, in France's Chauvet Cave, Paleolithic artists also bypassed docile prey to paint terrifying murals of cave lions in the most oxygen-deprived recesses of the Earth. Radiocarbon analysis proved those deepest chambers were used strictly for ritualistic predatoride, never for habitation, revealing a parallel need to use the Earth's darkest depths to confront apex predators. But at Sayburç, the end of the story is distinctly different. The stratigraphy of the Earth, packed tightly against the relief, directly contradicts the idea of natural collapse, revealing instead that this gallery was deliberately and systematically entombed under limestone rubble by the very people who built it. For cognitive archaeologists analyzing the broader Taş-Tepeler region, this subterranean space functioned as a terrifying theater for traumatic coming-of-age rituals. In this view, elders intentionally designed the gallery to induce psychological terror. By bringing initiates into absolute darkness and surrounding them with visceral, high-relief images of apex predators, they simulated the ultimate vulnerability of the human condition. The carving is seen as a permanent, educational nightmare designed to harden the next generation. But this theory falters against the final act of the site's creators. If this was a vital teaching tool for survival, why did they invest immense labor to deliberately and permanently bury it under tons of rubble? Another hypothesis must be considered. We can map the subterranean walls and carbon date the soil, but the Earth yields no answer to the one question that remains. Were they celebrating their dominance over the wild, or permanently surrendering to the monsters that ruled their nights? It was an act of psychological survival. But the gap in this theory is the most unsettling of all. If they buried this site to lock away their terror, why do we still feel the exact same dread when we look at it 11,000 years later? The deep chisel marks cut into the Sayburç limestone remain exactly as sharp today as the moment the prehistoric tools were dropped and abandoned. The heavy, claustrophobic darkness of that subterranean chamber still holds the echoes of humanity's earliest, most desperate anxieties. It is the haunting realization that human vulnerability has not fundamentally changed in 11 millennia, and that the mundane modern homes built directly above this site rest permanently upon the unresolved terrors of our ancient past. That question, the one those nameless artists buried in the dark, is now yours too. Do you think this subterranean carving was a triumphant boast of human survival against the wild, or a permanent monument to the monsters that ruled their nights? The archaeological record contains one further, deeply unsettling anomaly. Radar-detected structural voids extending even deeper beneath the Sayburç village foundations that have yet to be unearthed. Eon Discoveries exists for the gaps the mainstream historical record sealed over. Next time, we examine a submerged prehistoric settlement whose final documented layout perfectly mirrors a defensive perimeter against an enemy that left no physical trace. If you left this video with more questions than you arrived with, that is the correct response. There is more evidence, so subscribe and it will find you.